Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 23.
Yes, 23.
23.
Oh.
Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Another hiatus.
Yes, my sincere apologies.
Yeah, thanks to Ben sampling the delights of a Neapolitan summer.
It was rather special, yes.
It looked fantastic on the photos.
It was good. 35 bloody degrees. Not that I'm boasting. It's not what this podcast is about.
No.
Although I will be posting all the photos on our Instagram.
Still annoyed that I wasn't allowed to come along. I don't know why your wife.
It's bizarre, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just as flummoxed as you are.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, Hannah,
we're
it's
not
still
happy.
in the back of my mind. Yeah.
Honeymoon schmoneymoon.
Yeah.
That's what I say. I would have left in the evenings when things get romantic. I would have left.
Yeah, for about 15 minutes.
Yeah. I'm not going to, watch and critique. I'm in no position to critique. Anyway, this week, Asteroid City.
Yes.
Which will then prompt a broader discussion around Wes Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the themes in his films, but also the stylistic element, which is arguably the most noticeable thing about him.
Oh, yeah.
By a country mile.
Completely,
and is a big part of the reason why he has endeared himself to so many and has his fair share of detractors.
Yeah.
In my experience.
Yeah, I think so.
About him.
Especially more recently.
Yes.
I've noticed it's more recently people start to get sick of him.
Yes.
Which
I can sort of understand. I think we sort of said in the outro of the last episode that for me it's mood based. And I think for a lot of people that's the case with him.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, actually. I do see, you can be... I suppose you could be really in the mood to watch one of his films, but also equally, there'll be times in your life where putting one on, you just find it really irritating.
Yeah, you've just said bye to your dog.
Yeah. Not an appropriate time to put on the Darjeeling Limited, isn't it? Stick this on.
Yeah, I've got the perfect film for you.
Yeah.
But yes, so we're looking forward to that. In fact, let's do that now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questing the cinematic void.
Right then, old
Wesley Wales Anderson.
Wesley Wales Anderson. So I guess the flow of the discussion will be thus.
Yes.
A discussion about him, as his presence as a filmmaker, how he sort of etched his own corner in the sort of cinema realm.
Yeah, very, very, very unique.
Very unique, yeah. The stylistic choices that he makes and the way that he uses those stylistic approaches to interrogate certain themes, which are very typical of a certain kind of American filmmaker. So we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll talk about a few of his movies as well, for example's sake.
Cool.
Thread in a few of our viewer interactions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We've had a few of those for this one, which is great. I did sort of assume that someone like Wes Anderson would bring people in a little bit.
Yeah.
You guys haven't disappointed, so thank you for that. And then also discussion about Asteroid City itself.
Yes.
So then I guess when we're talking about Wes Anderson as a filmmaker, I think it's really important to think of him as someone that's part of this movement called American eccentric cinema.
Yeah.
So it's this collection of filmmakers, Wes Anderson, probably, as you mentioned, the most noticeable, the most notable member of this group. But there's other people like Charlie Kaufman, for example, or to a slightly lesser extent, Paul Thomas Anderson.
Okay.
I'm thinking more like Magnolia, really, of Paul Thomas Anderson, as opposed to Now, maybe. But and these are a collection of filmmakers that really sort of focus on these postmodern themes and ideas. If you think about Wes Anderson, he uses a lot of... Well, he mixes up a lot of eras of costume and decor, for example, in his set design, costume design.
And framing as well.
And framing,
He's got his own unique style of framing, but he uses aspect ratios to kind of hark back to an earlier time without explicitly mentioning that time.
Yeah,
it sort of just cues you into thinking, okay, this is from the 30s, this is from the 50s, and Asteroid City in particular does that. I think, you don't need a title card that says 1950, 62. Like, it's just sort of there, and that's how it's done. That's how he does it anyway. So, yeah. Interesting.
So the manipulation of time through the use of cinematic techniques, costume design, set design, even dialogue.
Yeah.
But also the way that he utilises that approach to talk about very postmodern themes, like, sort of that self-awareness, self-criticism, or a broader societal critique. through the lens of existentialist ideas, search for one's purpose, or one's identity, or indeed wider sort of socio-political issues such as consumerism, etc., which he sort of touches on. I think I've read a little bit around that, which I think is really interesting, because I've not really seen him as a filmmaker that's particularly critical of those things.
No, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that after I read it, because I wouldn't have thought that at all.
No, I didn't. I was just sort of obviously doing research for the episode, you know me. You know, like, that seems to be quite a common vein in his work, and it's funny that, you know, that's something that obviously we've missed.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, like, I don't know, something like I actually hated this film, but that film White Noise with Adam Driver, quite a recent one, that was like a kind of really overt critique, and so is the novel. I would consider that to be in a sort of similar vein in terms of being like having postmodern ideas as well.
100%.
So,
yeah.
But I wouldn't have got that from Wes Anderson's film personally. So there you go.
But of course, at the very heart of a lot of his films too, alongside all of that stuff, are very sort of familiar and relatable themes: familial dysfunction, isolation, loneliness.
Oh God, yeah.
Father figures,
social anxiety.
Troubled father figures, social anxiety. So he's a sort of mismatch of lots of these themes and ideas. But I'm particularly interested by that idea of this sort of eccentric cinema, this birth of a generation of filmmakers who sort of eschewed blockbuster cinema's approach to narrative and theme and idea, and tried to sort of, I guess, set up their stall in a way that was overtly different from that. You don't get much more different from that than the way Wes Anderson approaches his movies, do you really?
Not really, no. I want to mention pre-meat discussion. No, we're not just going to be discussing meat. Pre the meat of the discussion, I don't really get on with these films at all. I never have really. There's a few I like, but we'll get into this later. But I think this will be slightly different from what we usually do, in that, like, I will probably be absorbing the kind of ideas of the things that you've read about, as opposed to kind of actively talking about them myself, because I can't find any of it in his films. Like, I really don't think he's. I don't know why people like him so much. It's weird. Interesting. Okay. Sorry to kind of
no. I think it's good to come in with that point, because I think it'd be interesting for the episode's sake, really, in that. You know, you're obviously not a huge fan of his work. No. And I think it'd be interesting to have your take on these things, because I think, when people are a fan, as we've done a few episodes about this podcast, we obviously have a lot of similarities, a lot of crossovers in the films and directors we like. And that tends to sort of turn into a love letter, doesn't it, a little bit? So it'd be interesting for the sake of...
I won't shit all over him, but I've been thinking about this past week... whilst lying in the hot sun, about like why it is that I don't get on with him, and it's really interesting that some of the things you discussed there, it went, all of them went over my head. Like, I couldn't get those themes and ideas from his films at all. That's not to say they're not there. It's just something that I guess I struggle to. I don't have an antennae for it, I guess.
I think in his earlier films, I feel like his earlier work is certainly more driven by the more familiar stuff, like the sort of social awkwardness, the sort of familial dysfunctionality. If you think about Royal Tenenbaums, for example. Those that era of Wes Anderson, it feels more familiar and less sort of thematically inclined to be particularly existential in a lot of its themes or ideas, or sort of overtly critical about the dominant powers or consumerism, for example. Although obviously those elements are definitely there in his films. I think this sort of more sort of broader awareness has grown in his filmography as he's gone on. And I was actually surprised, because I watched Asteroid City about a week ago, but I hadn't seen French Dispatch. I watched that yesterday. And I was sort of expecting to be really lukewarm on both. I preferred Asteroid City to French Dispatch, definitely, but I actually quite enjoyed them on the basis of what I've just sort of talked about. I feel like there's a bit more of a broader sense of awareness, as opposed to just isolating himself into these sort of tried and tested themes, which, don't get me wrong, I think he does quite well. But I mean, I can totally understand that perspective, and I do think his art style, as brilliant as it is, and his clockwork camera work, is beautiful as it is, and as as people that appreciate the form and know what it's like to even make the most basic film, the difficulties of making the most basic film, you can totally appreciate it on that level. But it is, he's not changing his style for anyone. No. And whilst I admire that, I can completely understand why someone like yourself would find that overbearing and difficult. And also, it's not just that, but his characterization. I mean, the way he writes his screenplays, the dialogue between his characters, that sort of...
So stilted.
Yeah, that sort of almost sort of like bordering on monosyllabic, sort of like...
weird stream of consciousness. No social boundaries and no attention given towards even establishing any social boundaries. It's just like they're saying what they're thinking, and yet I can't ever find any emotion in any of it. And for me, it just makes it sounds insincere to me, and that's one of the problems I have with him. Like, there's like a veneer of insincerity about a lot of his characters, and it ends up, I just find them annoying. Like a lot of this podcast is going to be me saying, yeah, I find it annoying. I don't know, but I at the same time, it is difficult not to appreciate what he's trying to do for me. And again, as you mentioned, the camera work is undeniably amazing. I think it's too much. I think he uses the same stuff too much. But I mean, to have the command of that camera, it's just so kind of inch perfect. It's clearly really extensively rehearsed and very, very, very impressive,
and very much driven by him as well. I think I've read a few interviews of cast and crew talking about his process on set. And he is like he literally measures like the position of the camera to make sure it's like right centered. So right in the middle of every frame. And he exhaustively plots out the obviously all of the necessary things for his scenes, which are typically quite dynamic, a lot of movement.
Oddly, even though it's not like it's like a stop-start. It's not like dynamic in the sense that it's flying through stuff like kind of Fast X or something. It's dynamic in that it's really, really dynamic, and then it stops, and then something happens, and then it carries on again. It goes on a dolly track, and you're like, okay, it's on a dolly. Oh, hold on a minute, no, it's not, because it's panning backwards there. So it is genuinely, I do think it is really impressive, and it's only got better as well.
Yes. No, I absolutely agree with you. I think you're sort of right in some ways, and again, I think not to sort of keep mentioning this, but it does sort of boil down to mood for me. I think both times. Actually, to be fair, I expected more with Asteroid City to dislike it, and it won me over.
Oh, really?
I wasn't like, I didn't come out thinking, oh, this is the best film I've ever seen, obviously, but I came out thinking I am, pleasantly surprised by how won over I am by this. I think his handling of emotional complexities actually got better.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I thought Asteroid City was quite devoid of it. I must have missed something. Or
no, not at all.
Like I say, I just I can't tune into it, I suppose. But I thought there was no emotion in that film. And again, I just can't get past that.
There's something incredibly playful about his work, isn't it? I mean, it's obviously playful with the genre, playful with style. And I think it's even playful with influence. I mean, this guy clearly knows cinema. He's clearly someone that's incredibly passionate about cinema. You can see the influence of French New Wave in his work.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah.
Those sort of dolly shots sort of just immediately make me think French New Wave. Or German expressionism in the sort of ridiculousness of the set design, for example. The stylistic choices of the set design and how much they inform the themes and ideas, or the other stylistic choices in his films. Or like just filmmakers as well, like Ozu. I mean, the way Ozu like frames like interior spaces, and like a lot of his shots are like through like corridors into rooms, the domestic spaces. Long halls, and then he sort of frames characters in doorways and stuff like that. That all feels like, so I can totally see that his passion for cinema and the way he threads it into his own style, I think is really quite interesting and quite admirable. But I do think there's something overly playful. I think he's playing with a lot, probably to his detriment on occasion.
I think you can see, you might as well leave the markers on the floor for the actors. Presumably they get painted out. There's no point. Like you kind of like obviously you say that he kind of frames characters in doorways. He obsessively does it. It's almost like they're puppets, and he's placing them he's doing Warhammer or something. He's just placing them in areas which are kind of really obvious. So there's nothing, to me, I just think there's nothing natural about anything, and that bothers me for some reason. But
I think maybe being natural isn't really his thing.
No.
Yeah, I think to me it almost feels like his films, even though they're beautifully constructed in terms of aesthetic and the camera movement is always so slick, it almost always feels like a run through.
Yeah, okay.
Do you know what I mean? And I find that there's something about that I really like.
Okay, yeah,
You're sort of getting really into the gritty of the artistic process, which I think is especially important when you consider Asteroid City, which is about the artistic process. I think the process of creation from an from the mind of an artist, and sharing that with other artists, and then building something out of that. I think that's one of the key themes of Asteroid City.
With the playwright, and the old Academy ratio stuff with Edward Norton.
I really feel like that sort of works in that idea, and I think a lot of his films have that feeling to them. But no, I completely understand the cynicism. I mean, like I say, I think as much as I admire that playfulness and that sort of almost roughness amongst the sort of smooth nature of his cinematography.
I see what you're saying there. Yeah, there is a kind of weird, roughness about. Like, even I think if there's like a stone on the dolly track and it bumps it, he's not really going to care about that.
No,
he's going to care about the broad overview, and as long as it gets from A to B, that's when he's happy.
Yeah,
I did notice that a few times. There was a couple of reframes that were almost perfect, but not David Fincher perfect.
No,
they're not post-processed, stabilized, and stuff like that.
Yeah,
he's left in some grittiness.
Yeah,
I kind of like that about it. I was kind of
there's a bit of life in it, isn't there?
Yeah,
I think sometimes when you're in the pursuit of having everything inch perfect, can sometimes make things feel a bit sterile.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm going back to Fincher. I absolutely love
that.
David
Works
Fincher.
for him though.
It does work. Approach. Yeah, because none of his characters are particularly nice. So it sort of
and
does.
His colour palette's always dark green or brown.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I don't know. It's strange, because I was sort of gearing up for this episode to be quite negative about him. But after watching those two films and thinking about him more, I don't know. He's sort of he's one of those filmmakers to me that if I don't think about him for a long time, I'll just immediately feel this sense of this negativity just creeps in about him. Then I watch one of his films, I'm like, oh, actually, I do quite like you. I kind of forget that I have enthusiasm for you. I could
see people getting charmed every time one of his films comes out. People at work are talking about him. People that I don't usually discuss films with are like, "Oh, do you like Wes Anderson?" Really awkward because I don't. And I'm like, I like Fantastic Mr. Fox. Yeah, and it is funny how he charms such a broad spectrum of people,
and that's the interesting thing about him. If for people who work in creative industries or people that are artistically inclined, and that's not to say I'm not saying that in the sense that you have to be an actual artist to appreciate his work, but people that seem to be creatively minded, or he seems to have a real popularity with people like that. Do you know what I mean? I remember when we were at university, and I'm trying to think, was it Grand Budapest Hotel that was out when we were at uni, or was it?
That came out 2014. I think. So, that makes sense.
I remember talking to people about it that were in loads of different. Obviously, went to a creative university, everyone loved him. So it seemed like he has this sort of. If you're of that persuasion, it almost seems like a given that you're going to like Wes Anderson.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's because of the heightened style encourages the most sort of out there creative approach from all of the disciplines required to make his films. Fashion design, set design. I think people will just appreciate that regardless of the quality of the movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you think that overpowers the thematic intent of his films? As someone that thinks negatively about him, because I've say and gone, he's a postmodern filmmaker, self critique or societal critique. But is that justified on the basis that his style is pretty overwhelming?
Yeah, I think so. That's actually a really good way of putting it. Because I can't get past the style, I can't see anything else in there. As much as I try and peer in, Alfie has a good kind of analogy for Grand Budapest, and he's like, it's like a cake, and I'm like, but for me it's like a cake that's too sweet, and I cannot taste anything else other than sugar, but for him and also for Dan as well, who both absolutely adore Grand Budapest, they clearly can taste something else in it. But for me, I really, that is definitely one of the reasons why I don't get on with it is because I think the surface value of it overwhelms anything deeper.
Yeah. I mean, even with like Asteroid City, like even though I largely really enjoyed the film, there are a few exchanges and a few characters that just piss me off.
Yeah.
So I think I can totally. When I say that I'm bowled over by him every time I watch his films, it doesn't mean my blinders go off.
Yeah,
the things that annoy me about him are still there.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't like Grand Budapest Hotel that much in comparison. I actually prefer French Dispatch.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which I know is probably not a popular opinion.
No,
and I'm not saying that for that reason.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
You know, but I don't know. Like, I didn't really. I think his brand of humour is funny in short bursts.
Yeah,
and I think Grand Budapest Hotel was more overtly an attempt to make people laugh, whereas his style is more chucklesome.
Yeah,
it's not really going to like have you like crying with laughter.
No,
in the cinema seat, and I feel like the comedy element of that film didn't really work as strongly as it does in his other films.
Yeah, okay.
Because it bursts briefly out from whatever else is going on, then slips back into this sort of like
quite childish,
quirky sort of.
Yeah.
And it works that way for me, whereas I think leaning into the humour too much for me didn't work. But.
Yeah, it is okay. It's interesting. Yeah. I really don't like Grand Budapest, unsurprisingly. I still baffled by that movie.
Which films of his do you like then?
Yes.
And on the basis of what we've just discussed, why is it they rise above all of your sort of grievances with his approach?
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Moonrise Kingdom. I liked that a lot.
Yeah. Great.
Really sweet. A lot of handheld. I remember there being quite a lot of handheld cinematography in that, which was quite a departure. There's a central kind of very sweet, very innocent romance in that, which delighted me to no end. To the extent where I could get past that kind of like bizarre Boy Scout stuff. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I don't care about that. All I care about is these two characters getting to know each other on a beach or in a tent or something. That I remember that rose above. And also, Moonrise Kingdom isn't. Although there are moments which he indulges, like full on to his style, there are also moments where it is just quite nice and quite naturalistic.
I would agree,
yeah. Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs are two animations. I liked those because I think you expect a certain style from animation anyway. You expect the colour, you expect the rigidity, and you expect everything to be perfect because, you know, you're literally creating a world from, you know, you're not going to locations, are you? Although I think they did record sound on location.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, so you expect that kind of forced perfect stuff from animation, and
it's a heightened sense of manipulation, isn't it?
That's exactly because
everything is being created.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can sort of forgive that approach, on that basis. Yeah, I can see. I've not thought of it that way, but I see what you're coming from.
And also, there was a roughness to it, especially with Fantastic Mr. Fox. Like, you can see when the stop motion is moving, you can see where people have kind of like moved it, and there's like the fur kind of boils because it's different in every frame. I quite like that. I also quite like Rushmore because it's one of his earlier efforts. I don't remember Bottle Rocket all that well, but I remember Rushmore I didn't mind because it's more conventional. There's pepperings of like him being him. But I don't remember Rushmore all that well either, but I do remember enjoying it enough to kind of think, yeah, there was sort of potential there. And there's also like, I think with Rushmore, it's quite obviously like there is something sincere about that character, and he goes through a real arc. It's Jason Schwartzman, isn't it? And the arc is very sincere and very emotional at times, and it's set in the real world. So I liked that about Rushmore as well. So there's quite a few of his films I like, but the rest. Just no.
The rest, like shit.
Life Aquatic can really fuck off as far as I'm concerned. Like, go away. I never really got on with Bill Murray that much, even before the sort of allegations against. I didn't really get on with him before that anyway, so not a good start. Not a big Royal Tannenbaums person either, and. as the aforementioned Grand Budapest, I didn't get a chance to see French Dispatch, although from the trailers it looked very, very, very almost Asteroid City levels of control, which properly put me off. And yeah, I never got a chance to watch it. Sorry.
No, I mean, I think it's interesting what you say about Moonrise Kingdom, about that sort of his sensibilities as a filmmaker, and I think his approach as a writer as well, suiting a tale about young love.
Yeah.
About a coming of age story. And I think it's funny, I'd not really thought of it in that way, but it makes perfect sense that someone of those sort of, someone like Wes Anderson, who does sort of absolutely envelop himself and his audiences in that sort of quirky, off-kilter, childlike wonderment, I guess. It's sort of perfect that it would have, the two leads, and it would be, the story would centre around a love story between two young people.
Like the awkwardness faded away as they got to know each other. And there was something real in there, and I loved that, because before that was like, the regimented Boy Scout, what I talked about last time on the last podcast about people top buttons being done up all the time, standing there like a fucking statue, just doing nothing and staring into space, like that gave way to something really nice. And I love that about Moonrise Kingdom.
I'm a big fan. I pretty much like most of his movies. I wasn't the biggest fan of Grand Budapest. Isle of Dogs I thought was all right. I thought it was obviously artistically stunning. I preferred Fantastic Mr. Fox.
I liked that.
I don't know if that's because it's sort of anchored more in my childhood, so there's a nostalgic element there. It wouldn't be a Cinder Boys episode without mentioning that word.
No, God.
But I guess I think the film I want to talk about most before we sort of go into the discussion about Asteroid City is French Dispatch, which I know is going to be a bit difficult because you haven't seen it. But
sorry,
no, it's fine. I completely understand, because I think a lot of people came away from that film a bit disappointed with him. And when I told a few people we're going to be doing a Wes Anderson episode, they said, "Oh, have you seen the French Dispatch?" And their face had their expression was, "Don't bother."
Oh, right.
Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
But for me, I don't know. I think maybe I was still sort of riding off Asteroid City, but I sort of really admired his. Basically, it's sort of an ode to people who commit their lives to the written word.
Right.
So basically, reporters or
journalists.
Journalism. People who go out and do these pieces about an individual or a situation, and they write about it. It's not just people taking pictures under the Kerry Katona skirt or whatever. It's actually that's not the kind of journalism. Well, at least I don't think that's the kind of journalism that Wes Anderson's
I don't think
championing.
I don't think he'll explore that avenue of humanity.
No. Although she was in the film. No, she wasn't. But
she was in an Iceland advert beforehand, maybe.
In the film.
Yeah.
He loves Iceland. He's a big shopper. He loves it. There.
Apparently,
loves their vol au vents.
Oh man,
Him and Peter Andre hang out regularly, and eat vol au vents.
Just buy like fucking 6 packs of wagon wheels.
Just sit. Wes Anderson, Peter Andre, and Christopher Biggins in a lay-by off the M5.
Oh God,
eating wagon wheels in a transit van.
Are you going to write that screenplay about what we do? He's like,
maybe.
Might do.
I'd rather hang out with Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson, to be honest. But it's an ode to that. It's people who go out and put themselves in these situations and then write these pieces about it. And it's not just about informing people. It's about sort of almost enveloping people in the life of that person. Good quality journalism. That's what it should be, right?
Okay.
In effect. And the idea is that would impact or move someone sufficiently enough to take an opinion on something, or to inspire further action, etc., etc. Admittedly, a lot of that stuff is lost amongst the sort of quirkiness of Anderson's work. But it sort of splits each sort of foray into a different story by a different journalist into vignettes. So it's like separate little stories. So
bits in black and white, I assume.
Yes, of course. Bits in black and white. But there's a really good one about it's Tilda Swinton plays like an art critic for this magazine, and she goes and on a stage in front of people, of course, very much in the vein of Asteroid City or Anderson in general, talking about an artist who's in prison for murder, played by Benicio del Toro, and he has a relationship with the prison guard played by Lea Seydoux.
Oh, right, okay.
It's about their relationship and him as an artist, the struggles of the artist, and it's very cliche struggles of the artist.
Yeah.
And the sort of way that we separate art from the artist, etc., etc. I mean, Seydoux's fantastic in it. I mean, I'm a huge fan of her, so just, her turning up sort of halfway there to convincing me that she's going to be good. But she's a solid performer. So even in a film that's sort of like, I don't think like in the recent Bond films, she's solid, isn't she?
She's great. I think she's brilliant.
A fantastic actress, and she's one of my favourite performers in this film. And it's about their relationship. My other favourite performance in the film is Jeffrey Wright, who is another mainstay in Wes Anderson. And he plays like a food critic, and he's talking about this really sort of bizarre situation where he goes for dinner with a chief of police and gets embroiled in a kidnapping and the food they eat at the same time.
Okay.
It's very Wes Anderson. There's like an animated bit in the in the middle of it.
Right, yeah.
And Edward Norton turns up, obviously.
Of course he does.
But there's just something, I don't know, like it felt quite sort of...
There's an overall theme from, I haven't seen it, but there's an overall theme from what you're saying there that does sound quite weirdly appealing. Does sort of make me want to watch it.
Yeah, it is that sort of idea, like about sort of, again, like enveloping the reader in the world of what this reporter is trying to share with you.
Yeah.
These reporters, there's something quite lyrical and sweet and earnest about that in a way that sort of works with his style. There are a couple of vignettes that definitely don't work, that are just like, get over yourself. I did start to think this is getting really quite self-indulgent now. The Owen Wilson one wasn't that great.
Okay.
I don't think he's obviously doing this deliberately, but it just, he's playing to type too much.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't think he necessarily does that because the studio wants him to. I don't think he's that concerned with what the studios want him to do, but I think he obviously has his ways and his approaches, and he's going to stick religiously to them regardless of what people think.
His films don't cost that much. It's always like $20-25 million, so there won't be that much studio interference, and he does. They all make money, like as we said before.
That crowd, they'll always come for him regardless.
Flock. Yeah. I think French Dispatch was a bit of a victim of the pandemic, but it must have probably made its money elsewhere.
It's on Disney Plus. That's where I watched it. So.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Part of me wants to give it a go. I don't know why.
I don't know. There's just something in that sort of
just journalists and
and the sort of it is impassioned. He genuinely, obviously cares about the subject matter and genuinely cares about the people, and they've obviously had a significant influence on him as a writer himself and as a creative. And I think that's something you feel in the film, and it's quite sweet. Actually.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And I was expecting to be really indifferent to it, and there were parts I was indifferent to.
Yeah.
And I've sort of skirted around my criticisms a little bit, but I as I said, I do think there is something a bit self-indulgent, particularly about French Dispatch. And there were things I was like, fucking hell, this is too much.
It's getting like even the story gets lost in it all. I think.
It gets drowned out
confused by some Asteroid City. I was like, I can't even really remember what's going on because you've done so much quirky stuff. I'm getting really distracted. It doesn't help that it puts me off anyway. And I just kind of remember thinking at points, what is this? What's this even about again? What am I trying to... Where's the thread? Give me a rope to follow, and kind of so I can find my way here. I can imagine French Dispatch, particularly with, because vignette films can be quite tough to have a sort of an overarching idea anyway. So fair play to him if he's managed that with at least some of them, I suppose. Yeah.
I mean, I'm interested to know, because obviously every director has there'll obviously be a lot of through lines within every director's work. And some are more obvious than others. And this is obviously thematically, artistically, narratively, etc., or even down to the actors they use. How does he get away with it? Because he is the most overt example of it. To my mind. How is it he gets away with it when other filmmakers might not? Because I find that really interesting, and I'm not necessarily saying this from the perspective, because again, I'm pretty all right with Anderson, but I do wonder, like, how much gas has he got in the tank before people start going, come on, mate, something else now?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the best person to answer that question because I thought his gas ran low ages ago. I'd maintain what I said on the last podcast. Is I really wanted to do a horror film. I've got an idea for you, Wes. A horror film idea. Set, right, you're going to like this. Set in Paris. Ooh, Paris. You like Paris, don't you, Wes? Yeah. You twat. No.
Get an haircut, hippie.
Yeah. So, set in 1945, just after the liberation of Paris, right? And it follows a German sniper, and he's stuck in Paris. And obviously, the French have largely dispatched or dispersed the majority of the SS and the German armed forces. You're stuck there, and it's a night with you and your friend who's been shot, and you're just in a room, and you've got to survive the night with a body. I don't know. I want you to do this, Wes. I want you to be the person to make this film that I've just thought of now. I don't know why. I just want him to do something scary because I feel like his framing and his kind of use of light, especially the black and white segments, can be quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I really think horror will be a really interesting, unusual, and a stab in the dark. Just something like tantalizing and just some new territory for him to explore. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Don't worry, Wes. Like, you clearly, your films, majority of them do really well. There's a few exceptions, but try something else.
Yeah, the studios keep coming back for more, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this. This is a bit of a sort of a stretch of a comparison. We talked about, Marvel quite some time ago now, and their sort of refusal to change things, sort of, at least sort of narratively speaking, because their model suits them so well, regardless if you love them or loathe them. They've established it.
Yeah.
And then when they hired Chloe Zhao,
yes,
who's more into these sort of like quiet, meditative tales about identity or whatever, and then they bring her in and she's like, no, I'm an Oscar winner, you brought me in, I'm going to approach this my way. And they're like, yeah, okay, let's give this a go. This might please the critics. And it completely fucking backfired.
Largely seen as a failure. I haven't actually seen it.
No, I haven't, and I'm intrigued. I might actually give it a go on that basis because I love the idea of just seeing that unfold and trying to get into the mindset of like the fucking money men at Marvel.
Oh my god, yeah,
fucking losing their minds. But for Zhao, obviously, I think that's probably like she's not going to be probably working in that kind of cinema again. I don't think as a result of that.
No, I'd be very surprised. I mean, she'll definitely work again.
Oh, she's a fantastic director, and I think her flirtation with the big blockbuster. I mean, she's not the first, widely critically adored filmmaker to fail at a blockbuster film.
No, not
Lynch.
At all. Oh god, yeah,
with Dune, right? So to name one of many, and I feel like it almost makes a director to have that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Edgar Wright with Ant-Man almost went into that territory.
Yeah.
And he was lucky enough to recognise the problems early doors and get out of there whilst he could.
Yeah.
And but that didn't stop them from exploring other kind of established directors with like established themes and visual styles. And it's a shame that they're not going to carry on doing
getting them to water them down in the pursuit of.
Yeah.
But what I mean in the context of Wes Anderson is that he's not going to have like a Chloe Zhao thing where he's like, no, you can't make this kind of film anymore.
Yeah.
He's going to be able to like. If he makes if he goes out, say he does make this,
German sniper movie, yeah,
which I quite like the idea of, to be honest, and I can see why you picked that era and that for him because it'd be perfect for him.
Yeah.
If that fucking fails, then who cares? Like,
I think
he's got enough in the bank for people to go right. You've had your dud.
Yeah.
Don't get another film with Wes Anderson with a beret riding around on a bike again, please.
Yeah.
Shots.
Yeah, and if it does work, then perfect. Try something else again.
But no, going back to what we were saying about him having a free pass, I do think it is because of the meticulous nature of the way he does things, the style in which he does things, and obviously for the majority of people, they that fuses with his thematic intentions well enough.
Yeah.
I think the sort of hunger for these existentialist tales, I think, only grows when things are seemingly getting worse.
Yeah, okay,
Do you know what I mean? And I don't mean to say that in the sense that like everything, I sat in relative comfort right now, so it's not. But things feel like there's a sort of more apocalyptic feel to things, and I think people turn to, artists or filmmakers or writers or whatever, people that are really good at tapping into these anxieties and these feelings, or indeed that feeling of like uncertainty. Okay. And I think maybe that's why the appetite for Wes Anderson is still quite strong. Yeah. But the flip side to that is that with the same argument regarding that is that there's also a sufficient amount of escapism too. Yeah. His films offer that escapism. And I think that you're right in the sense of when you said about you not being quite sure about the sort of deeper thematic elements of his work. When you think about it in the context of escapism, it doesn't really fit well. Because the bright colours, the sort of monosyllabic character exchanges, the prolonged periods of social awkwardness. Yeah. That is, that facilitates that escapist element perhaps more than it does his thematic intention. But I think in both ways that might be for both reasons. That might be why people are drawn to his films still. Yeah. And of course the visual element. I think for some people that is just enough. Yeah. If you have a visual feast, and I think that's quite nice in a way, because I think in a world where people are getting pretty bored of like CGI, for example, or just expect CGI and sit in the cinema and watch it in a dead-eyed fassion, it's nice to see someone being at least fucking meticulous about real things. Yeah, very true. Set design, and it is all real and very tangible. And for me, there's a texture to it. Yeah, like you said earlier, with the imperfection, that's a texture. That is something to sort of like really. It feels like more part of cinema. Not to get too Scorsese about it, but it gives it a sort of energy, almost a life. Yeah, that CGI, for all of its potential brilliance and the hard-working people behind it, can't do. No, it can't. It never will either. No matter how good it gets, you'll always be able to tell. I think. Yeah. It'll always be used by blockbuster studios in the pursuit of as much money as possible. So it's always going to struggle to attain that. Yeah. And it's nice that as well, on the positive side of him is he's got a lot of stars in his films as well. And usually with stars and with celebrities, the reason why a lot of computer-generated imagery is used is because of their schedule and because of how expensive they are. Whereas what I think Wes Anderson does is he employs their schedule in a really kind of tactile manner. Scarlett Johansson might not have. She probably only filmed for a week and a half. It wouldn't have surprised me at all because there's a lot of scenes where she's not in it. There's a lot of scenes where Steve Carell's not about. And so he kind of doesn't employ a kind of post-processing method to get these stars on screen. He uses, like you said earlier, that vignette to give you not only sort of a visual splendor, but also like the people that you like watching. And in heaps as well. Like it's star-studded. Like a lot of his recent films have got absolutely jam-packed. Mental amounts of people. And people really like working with him as well. Apparently, he has like all of the actors stay in his own hotel. And you'll hang out and have dinner together. I think he is very keen to cultivate a sort of a family of artists. That's nice. All in the pursuit of this one thing in his movie or many things in his movies, and I do like that. Maybe that's what bowls me over more than anything else. That this, I don't know. Yeah, his process that is quite sweet. I'll give him that. Yeah, that is sweet. I'd like to be for a wanker.
Apparently, he got his cock out in Waitrose in Leamington Spa. I'm gonna start that rumour, Wes.
Okay, so we're talking about the idea of his style and how sort of essential that is and how recognisable it is. How does auteur theory apply to him?
Heavily in his favour, I think.
I think so. Because every article I read about him, I'd already sort of had this thought in my head that if you're that distinctive, this theory, as you said, has to sort of it has to apply to him, right? But every article I read about him, it was like auteur theory came up, and it wasn't even necessarily like real filmy articles. It would be like general articles. They would be like the auteur theory. Then obviously to do that thing where they explain what the auteur theory is. And then they go, and Wes Anderson is one of them. Do you think that applies to him and on the basis of? The stylistic elements and the thematic elements of his films.
He very, very obviously has complete control over every single aspect of his films. I mean, that's not to say he doesn't collaborate, and, you know, judging from what you said, it's very clear that he has a very positive working relationship with a lot of people, and he probably utilises their own skills, but there's a reason why he's stuck with them, and that's because he likes what they do, because they're in tune with his own ideas. I think he's kind of the opposite of Alex Garland, who's very vocal about letting people breathe in their own creative space and just going with what they want to do. I don't think it's the case with Wes Anderson at all. No. I think he has a painting in his mind for every single shot of the film, and if it's not that, he's doing it again.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I think auteur theory can quite often stray into negative territory about almost like that James Cameron-y, like, no, do it again.
Yeah.
I'm going to nail your phone to the wall if it keeps ringing kind of thing. And it's not that at all, because collaboration, if it's with the right person, can go into the idea of as the singular vision. Completely. Yeah, I don't have any doubt in my mind that he's a big supporter of that idea.
I think you're right. I think if you think about particularly filmmaking, or the process of filmmaking, is quite a hierarchical practice. You know, the director is obviously at the top.
Yeah.
And the director, all of the creative decisions go through them.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that make the sort of key decisions about the direction of the film itself in every department.
Yep.
And obviously, like you say, some directors are more inclined to trust in the creative impetus of other individuals.
Yeah.
Whereas others will, like you say, pick the ones they like because they best service their own impulses. Or indeed, perhaps their creative impulses are just more compatible with their own. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's difficult to know without being on the set with him how much of a tyrant or not this guy is, you know.
No, yeah.
And I think it'd be hard to imagine it on the basis of the end product of his work, of his processes, the processes he shares with others. It'd be hard to imagine him being a tyrant, wouldn't it?
Completely.
Everyone, you say the top bundled up with the tires, he's there like, I said oat milk, smashing it on the floor, pissing on a runner because they put watercress in his sandwich or something, you know. But no, I think at least, you know, on an artistic level, and the fact that his fucking work, you know, I mean, again, it's very thematically and visually familiar and similar.
Yeah.
And I mean that mostly positively. And I know you feel differently about that.
Yeah, he is like the kind of film version of Picasso. It's like you look at a Picasso and you're like, oh, that's a Picasso. It's not like, I don't know, some like more of an impressionist artists who you might get, you know, apart from maybe Monet or something with his like water lilies, but most of their paintings bleed into each other because the style is similar, and yet, his stands out like a sore thumb.
Yeah. So, to the polls then.
Yes.
So, when I was sat in the cinema before the film, I like to get all the polls out because it stops me having to watch the god-awful adverts. So, I put a poll out saying, what would you like to see Old Wes do next? 13% said more of the same. 87% said something different.
Right.
So again, I mean, this is only 100 or so followers. So is it a microcosm for the cinematic attitudes of the masses?
Enough people,
yeah, maybe. To be fair, there's probably been studies that of similar numbers that have probably guided a lot more important things,
pharmaceuticals and stuff.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I'm glad, and I hope that that sentiment gets somehow brought across to not specifically with this podcast, but I hope that he somehow gets that from maybe this audience reception to Asteroid City, and it does make something different, because I'd go and watch that. I would.
Yeah.
No,
and you'd be hopeful of, you know, of something good as well. You wouldn't go, he's doing something new, I hope it's shit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A few comments as well. I also asked if people, you know, liked Wes Anderson and what it was they liked about him. Lee said, so beloved Lee, if you want to hear his voice, or if you don't know his voice, listen to our Canon Films episode. Canon Films episode, because that will give you some indication what his voice is like. Beautiful, angelic. He said, I think he's an artist who has a style that he's honed for nearly 30 years. It's not for everyone, and may be grating to some, but a filmmaker should embrace a style if it works for him. It has been ruined by memes and copies, but when films are getting more and more generic, it's nice to see someone actually standing out. Plus, I like flawed father figures in his work.
There you go. Okay, that's
sorry for the
interesting.
bombardment. He then finishes with, but no, that is a welcome bombardment.
Yeah, no, that's quite good. I kind of see where he's coming from in that, but like, whereas I think his style is quite. It's not generic at all. It's really unique, but there's so much of it. There's a lot of examples of it now that I kind of see it as a cliche. Whereas what Lee's saying is, it stands apart from cliche because it is so different. That's kind of interesting. Fair play, Lee. Yeah. That's
Following on from that, Alfie says he's one of a kind. His style is so singular, and there are no substitutes for the real thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, you say what you will, level what you will at old Wesley, but I mean, at the end of the day, if people try and do something similar to him, they're just gonna get called out for it.
Oh yeah, immediately.
Which again is interesting on the basis that so many filmmakers influence so many other filmmakers in pretty sort of unsubtle ways at times, and yet with Wes Anderson he has this almost shield around him that prevents that. Maybe it's because he leans so much into these things that an attempt to copy it would just be seen. It's like only one person can do this because it'd be too much.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, even down to the camera work alone. Even if the film itself was like a kind of lit like a David Lynch film or David Fincher or whatever, if the camera work's doing that, the pan, the quick pan, then the dolly, then the quick pan, and then the up, and then the down, you'd be like, oh, that's like a Wes Anderson film. Immediately you'll be cued into that. Because of how unique it is. So yeah, there you go.
Dale says, maybe I have not seen many of his films. Grand Bud is great. I assume he's Grand Budapest and not some sort of stoner film.
Yeah.
I just know him for his colour grades.
Oh, okay.
So, Dale will be coming from that, from a technical perspective. And again, hard to argue with him on his brilliance in that department.
No, very true. Yeah, it's very... someone I know worked on the French Dispatch, and there's the software for colour grading is called Baselight, and it works in layers. Apparently it had like hundreds of grade strips, like hundreds of layers of. So I mean, clearly, very meticulous. Clearly not easy. So yeah, I do agree on that front. Yeah, the color grading is I mean, especially with Asteroid City, actually, really unique and clearly not easy. So fair enough.
And we talk about that sort of playful style and that almost. There's a certain irreverence in a way, isn't there? But obviously to achieve that, there's a lot of hard work even then, isn't there? I mean,
oh my god, yeah. You'll have to have that poor old Baselight is going to crash a lot if there's 100 grade strips on it.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Should we move on to Asteroid City then? Because there's a few comments here about Asteroid City, and I'll try and thread them through the discussion about the film.
Yeah.
So, given on what we sort of talked about on the basis of his stylistic and thematic approach, I've said that a lot.
That's right.
But they're key things, aren't they?
Yeah.
What were your initial feelings and thoughts about the film?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying I didn't really enjoy it. I did not get the kind of artist and the sort of the story element you mentioned earlier about the kind of the writer and the writer's plight. That went way over my head. I was confused by the vignette of the Edward Norton side of things and Adrian Brody, although I did quite like him in it. I always like him in anything he's in, really.
Where's he gone, by the way?
I don't know, because he won an Oscar in 2002.
I mean, he seems to like come out of the darkness for Wes Anderson, but he's not. I saw him he's been in a few like bargain bin action films, I think.
Yeah, he has. Yeah,
so what's happened there?
I'm not sure. I really, it's odd.
He's talented. He's a good actor.
Really good. He was in Blonde, actually. He's good in Blonde. He plays Arthur Miller in Blonde, and that's a really genuinely great performance. So he crops up occasionally, but it is occasionally and worryingly occasionally.
Yeah, because it felt like if you win an Oscar in a film like The Pianist, I mean, obviously I know the Polanski attachment's obviously not going to do you many favours, but I think ultimately if you just focus on him, he's good in the movie.
He's brilliant.
He was also pretty good in King Kong.
Yeah,
I like that King Kong.
Yeah,
I don't know why people. King Kong. I like that film.
Yeah, same actually.
Yeah, where is he? Bring back the Broadster. Hashtag Bring back Broadster. See that'll be our first post on our Threads account.
Yeah.
Bring back the Broadster.
Yeah. It's a still from him from the film Predators. So initial thoughts on Asteroid City: confused, irritated because it was Wes Anderson squared in a lot of aspects. I liked the scene with the alien. I actually really liked that. It was like a breath of fresh air. And because it's stop motion animated, I think. And there's there's quite a good joke earlier involving Jeff Goldblum, who has a little cameo, which I found quite funny. That was a great little moment, but yeah, largely I did think it was more of the same. Really, the characters were just, to me, insufferable and were devoid of any kind of there's a sort of story about a dead recently deceased mother in it, which I thought had potential at the beginning, but for me didn't really go anywhere.
No, admittedly that doesn't really go anywhere.
No, and I thought his attempts to wrangle humour out of something which is quite tragic were a bit misguided and not that funny either. His use of sort of adolescent boys standing stock still and staring into the distance and again, like we were saying earlier, that sort of monosyllabic tone that he employs all the time. I was like, oh fuck, I can't do it. I cannot sit through this. I really, really struggle with that. And it's in every one of his films. The top button thing, I didn't like it overall at all. There's some good shots at the beginning of a train, some of which were models and some of which weren't. The set design was interesting. Some of it harkened back to what I consider to be like a bad school play. But that's part of his charm, and I can understand that. And how long have I been talking? Quite a while.
That's right. No.
Yeah. That's my initial take from it. I didn't find any themes and ideas in it really, and so I'm interested to hear what your thoughts on that side of it were really.
Well, firstly, I'd start by agreeing with you. Sorry, that I think the dead mum thing was pointless.
Completely pointless.
That was, I think, Wes Anderson at his worst. Yep. Don't get me wrong, I was about to say I'm all for a dead
or for a dead mum.
I'm all for a dead mum in films. No, if you can convey that humour successfully, then and you can earn it, you can earn that right. To frame it comically, then fair play. But I think in this instance, it didn't really serve the characters or the wider narrative in any particular depth.
No,
and I think again it served, I think, some of Wes Anderson's worst impulses, certainly in his inclusion of humour or attempting to pump too much humour into his films. I think he's definitely funnier when he litters the more comedic elements in a sparse manner across his films. Okay. So I completely agree with you there. I felt the film was about the sort of the agony of the unknown.
Okay.
And the sort of way in which artists or creatives and scientists are trying to sort of unpick that unknown.
Okay,
and,
does that extend to Edward Norton's scenes as well?
Yeah.
Is he trying to tap into the unknown as well?
I think so. I think, and I think it's one of the few times in Anderson's career where the use of that sort of meta stuff with the play and the film being... the play. So the play is being planned and then acted, and then everything we see in Asteroid City is the play.
Yeah. Okay.
A bit disjointed, but I quite liked that in terms of when you consider it through the lens of that theme, the idea of the role of good art and good create is to try and unpick the unknown and not necessarily find the answers for it either. It's trying to get a bit closer to the inexplicable. The understanding that sort of the unknowable feelings within you can't quite articulate, both good and bad. When you're impacted by a really good piece of art, regardless if it's a movie or whatever, there's lots you can understand why you like it, but there's lots you can't.
Okay,
and I like that Wes Anderson is trying to sort of explore that.
Okay,
I feel like that meta element of the film worked really well, as did the inclusion of the sort of the scientific element, even though it's very twee and dialed up to 11 in the way that you expect from Anderson.
Is this? Are you kind of talking a little bit about? There's an argument towards the beginning about why does he burn his hand? Is that the point of that then? Is that kind of saying nobody knows why he burns his hand, but he does it, and like there's an intent there, but all that matters to you, the actor, and you, the audience, is that it happens.
Yeah,
is that kind of what he's trying to say? Right, okay.
Because that's the exchange Schwartzman has with Brody, Adrian Brody, isn't it? Yeah, which I really liked.
Okay, yeah.
Again, I was a big fan of Brody. Bring back Brody.
Yeah.
Follow us on Threads. We don't have a Threads. Maybe we should. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
And I liked that, and it won me over in a way that I didn't expect.
Okay.
Because again, I think if you probably would have guessed from the tone of the outro of our last episode that I was fully prepared to be like, nah.
Yeah, being more critical. Yeah.
And again, it unlocked that small Wes Anderson box within my brain that I sort of just shelve and let get really dusty, and then I get cynical about it. And that doesn't. Again, that's not to say that I'd be like, "Oh, this is brilliant" to every one of his films. But I just found that element worked really, really well, and I really liked the way he utilised the camera in that small space. I think it's one of the smallest spaces he's worked in. The film feels a bit more confined in that regard, and it almost gives it, to me anyway, you get a bit more time with that space and the characters that inhabit that space, and through their interactions you get a little bit more than you usually would from a Wes Anderson character.
Okay, yeah.
I totally agree with you in the sense a lot of it's still quite monosyllabic, a lot of it's stilted, and the characters lay all of their sort of demons and other stuff out on early doors. Yeah. But I think there's something in that sort of confined space that he operates in Asteroid City, which is like a small cluster of buildings around a highway.
Yeah.
The way he moves that camera around, I think he extracts something more that's on a sort of deeper level than all that stuff.
Okay, yeah.
And it sort of just worked for me. Like I quite liked the interactions from Johansson and Scarlett Johansson and Schwartzman.
Okay, yeah.
Again, he's sort of playing these archetypes, the troubled artist, which is something he taps into with The French Dispatch. How troubled artists almost like submerge themselves in their own struggles.
Okay, yeah.
And it's almost become like a sort of like a trope, like a really shitty trope of a creative that they have to be like besieged by existential angst or have to have some horrible dark past for them to make good stuff, or have demons,
Yeah.
And I think he sort of, he takes the piss out of that, but is also very supportive of it at the same time.
Okay, yeah. I see that,
which I also really liked.
Theme. Yeah.
There were things that annoyed me, like the guy playing Schwartzman's son. I wasn't that keen on him.
No.
I thought he was like, if you typed into AI, an AI generator, give me a Wes Anderson character in its purest form, it would be him.
Exactly, yeah, that's it.
And that sort of bothered me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really see a lot of what he was doing.
Wasn't he just like there's kind of a cluster of child geniuses, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And none of them, I mean, there's a bit where they play like a game where they have to remember names.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, God.
Yeah.
It's only an hour 43 as well. I'm really dragging on. I do not care about your stupid game. Actually, I do agree with you, though, that I think Schwartzman was the most interesting out of all the characters, followed closely by Scarlett Johansson's character. Scarlett Johansson plays like an actress, doesn't she?
Yeah,
like
a stage actress.
Yeah, that's right. Who's like, obviously, like you say, kind of troubled, and he plays like a war photographer who's used to photographing things as they happen, and he's now greeted with a world in which nothing is happening fast. He has like, there's a bit where he has to ask permission for her picture. I quite like that, and I like that exchange, and I like their kind of budding romance. I thought it ended with a dud because Scarlett Johansson just fucks off and then leaves him her address, and I was like, I kind of wanted that moment where they drive away together in the sunset, even though obviously that's like a massive cliche. I kind of thought that would have worked better, but she just leaves. I was like, what? Oh right, okay, that's gone then. Anyway, I see what you're saying.
Tom Hanks as well. He was quite good at it.
Yeah.
I feel like Tom Hanks is one of those people like they're like a few actors or people that everyone universally loves, and that by their nature makes them annoying.
Yeah.
And Tom Hanks is one of those people that everyone fucking loves.
Yeah.
And I just, every time I hear his name, it doesn't necessarily make me not want to watch the film.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me necessarily think he doesn't have a good performance in him, because he absolutely definitely does.
Oh, yeah.
But like, it just immediately, there's that sort of twatty part of me that gets my back up about it.
Yeah.
But he was quite good in it, actually.
Yeah, I liked him.
And he played against type a little bit. He didn't play someone that was that likeable.
No.
Which is sort of... I know he played a film recently where he played someone like that, but it looked fucking shit. I can't even remember the name of the film, but...
A Man Called Otto.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
So that classic sort of old guy needs to have his like heart...
Yeah,
the sort of ice around his heart melted.
Yeah. He's been in a lot of films like that. Like, he was in a film which apparently was quite good. I never watched a Good Day in the Neighborhood or something like
right,
that.
not even heard of that.
And then didn't he play Walt Disney in something as well?
He played who's the guy who wears the red jumpers? He was on American TV for a long time.
That's the
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so he played him. I mean, I think he's a great actor. Like, you know, Bridge of Spies, Castaway. Obviously, like, you know, I even quite like Forrest Gump actually. Although it hasn't aged tremendously well. But yeah, I do agree with you. He sometimes you're like, oh, he kind of Disney-fies things. Sometimes you're like, he's kind of America's sort of dad.
Yeah.
And it can be a bit of a hit or miss situation with him recently. I'd say post like 2010 maybe. His roles have started to teeter a bit more toward that sort of Disney heartwarming shit, which doesn't really work. But yeah, he can surprise you, you know?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. I also quite like the use of music in Asteroid City.
Yeah.
I thought it was quite nice. There's something Coen-esque about it, I felt.
Okay, yeah.
And it's funny, we sort of talk about...
the desert setting, right, yeah.
We talk about these sort of eccentric American filmmakers. I think the early Coens, right? They definitely fit in there.
Oh yeah, big time.
And I think their influence on that sort of that sort of southern twang in Asteroid City I feel is quite prevalent.
Yeah.
Particularly in the musical numbers, the small little musical numbers. I quite like them, actually.
There's quite a nice moment, sort of a budding relationship between this cowboy character and a teacher.
Yeah,
it's quite sweet.
Yeah.
Throwaway moment. I'd like that. I would have liked that to be expanded on a little bit, if anything. I thought that could have encompassed more of like a half an hour section of the film on its own. That was one of its strengths, and music is a big part of that and their kind of story. And there's quite a reasonably funny, I think, anyway. Song in it, which kind of just happens out of nowhere. I agree.
Maybe there's something to be said about that with Anderson. Like, the throwaway moments that he doesn't develop are often the best things.
Yeah.
If he lingers on something for too long, I think maybe he shows the elements that don't sort of necessarily work. But maybe there's something in that.
Maybe, yeah.
That's maybe why French Dispatch worked for me, because the vignettes were small enough to not overstay their welcome.
There's always like, I mean, it's just an odd example, but there's a spate in sort of the mid-2000s of films that had 3 stories and they all interconnected.
That was a big deal.
Yeah. And you always had your favourites. I always had my favourite story, like Babel. My favourite story out of the 3 was the deaf girl.
Oh yeah.
And that was always the reason I watched that film again and again and again, was mainly because of that story. And there's 2 other stories happening at the same time. You kind of had to endure almost to get to the good stuff. But you couldn't just kind of, you can't edit the other bits out, so you have to watch it as a whole, and who knows, maybe it wouldn't work without those other elements as well. So yeah.
Okay, so before we close our remarks on the film, let's turn to the febrile masses. Alex from the Film Angle says, I fucking hate it. I'm not doing it. You're too nice. I think we all got excited by sci-fi Anderson film, but it was essentially sci-fi light. Lean harder into a genre.
Ooh, I agree with that.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, the alien bit was my favourite bit as well, and if he leant harder into that, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. Yeah, I totally see what you're saying there, Alex.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. I there was something about that moment of like separated so far from reality that kind of inhabited a genre in quite a kind of almost hilariously naff way, like the way that UFO moves and stuff. I was I'm bored with this. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Jess says better story next time. Maintain quality in set design.
Okay,
so you're not alone in people not necessarily being bowled over by the sort of narrative devices employed in the film.
No, so really fractured, actually quite difficult to follow because of how Wes Anderson it is. Yeah, totally agree.
Alfie again
Yep.
says Astro City completes a thematic trilogy with Grand Budapest and French Dispatch.
Okay.
So maybe there's some sort of justification there for the overt similarities in the sense there is like a trilogy, there's like a through line through them.
Okay, yeah, a trilogy where he's just going all out.
Yeah.
Doubling down on his style. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
So there we go. The masses have spoken.
Thank you very much for.
Yeah, thank you.
And please do keep commenting. It's always really nice to hear what people have to say about various movies as we review them,
as we quest the celluloid realm. Outro.
Questing the cinematic void.
There we have it then.
There we have it then. Yeah,
yeah, there we have it then. Good to talk about old Wes. I know we're sort of a bit split on him, but you know he's a mainstay at the moment and a huge voice in American cinema.
Yeah, I do find him fascinating.
Yeah,
in just as what we were saying earlier about how he can capture so many people's imaginations. You wouldn't expect that from a filmmaker whose style is so rigid and so against type. So it is interesting.
Yeah,
definitely.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Interested to see what he does next, I guess.
Yeah, do my German Spy.
If he does, would you be a bit annoyed?
I actually would. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is exactly what happened with. Do you remember World War Z?
Yeah.
Right? So I made when I was 12 or 13. I made a zombie film. And that concerned a plane crash that happened in Wales, and there was a zombie on the plane. And that's exactly what happens in the third act of World War Z. And I maintain that they saw my 12-year-old sort of I think it might have been 14.
Did you put it on YouTube?
Yeah, I put it on YouTube. And then 3 years
see.
later, fucking Mark Forster must have seen it and be like, I like that plane crash in Wales. The whole third act of World War Z. I was like, this is like the thing I did. With no money on holiday one year. There you go.
Unbelievable.
So yeah. Let it be known now, I'll be simultaneously mesmerised and also really annoyed with you, Wes, if you do my if you do my kind of French liberation post World War II or nearly post World War II German sniper film.
That should be the title of the film as well.
Yeah.
Wes Anderson title like that.
Yeah,
maybe part of it in brackets or something.
Yeah.
Moving on then. It's been a bit of a busy time, scheduling sake. So unfortunately, for that reason, we're going to have to drop Mission Impossible, which is a shame because I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
However, we feel like that would also work well as an episode on its own. So a discussion about the
just the franchise as a whole.
Yeah.
Maybe when it comes out on streaming or something, we can tie it into that, and we could maybe take some time to watch a fair few of them again.
Yes, I have seen all of them, obviously, bar the new one. But I think I've got most of them on Blu-ray, so we can maybe have like just a day of watching Mission Impossible films. That'd be quite good.
I'll be up for that.
Like the sort of Alan Partridge Bond-a-thon.
Yeah, it would be like that. Yeah, I'll bring some Sunny D.
Put it on my Blu-rays. I'd be so devastated.
Oh man.
So we'll shelve that, but by no means does that mean it's going to gather dust and never see the light of day, because we're both big Mission Impossible fans. And also it'd be interesting to talk about Tom Cruise as well, because he's a curious artifact in a way, in the way he conducts himself as a Hollywood star, both on screen and off.
Yeah,
and how that makes him different to pretty much everyone else in Hollywood, really.
Yeah.
Enough of that. We'll talk about that another time. However, we felt it best to leave Ethan Hunt in the dust in favour of Oppenheimer and Barbie.
Yeah.
Two films that have been, I guess because they're released on the same day, have been coupled together with each other.
Yeah, there's
for
a thing.
Sort of, meme-worthy reasons.
Yeah. I honestly think Warner, because of Barbie's Warner Brothers. And Nolan has left Warner Brothers,
of course,
famously, for them and their releasing strategy. I genuinely think there might be some bad blood between them, because to piss him off, they're releasing their film on the same day as his.
Yeah.
And it's clearly going to pay off, because I think Barbie is on track to beat it, which isn't surprising because Barbie isn't R-rated and Oppenheimer is. Oppenheimer's going to, the themes in Oppenheimer are quite hefty. So even if it does really well, I think Barbie will beat it. I think that's intentional,
It's interesting, isn't it? I also think that marketing strategy is almost sort of backfired in the sense that people are pairing the films together.
Yeah.
Like, watch Barbie first and then watch Oppenheimer. Or the other way, I can't remember which way they're saying, but they're almost saying that these films work well. You've got one really heavy film about one of the most pivotal moments in human history, most harrowing moments in human history, and Barbie.
I know.
Which apparently is pretty good. I mean, I don't really have... My relationship to Barbie is obviously through the lens of watching my sisters play with Barbies. Not now. Apparently, it's Gerwig, man. I mean, she's gonna do some good stuff with anything.
Baumbach screenplay as well.
Oh, is it? Okay, well there we go then. I'm not sure which order we'll do it in. Yeah. But rest assured, both of those episodes will be out soon, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, look forward to it.
In the meantime, have a lovely week, and we'll catch you in the next one.
See you then.
Lots of love. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.